Conventional banks own more in whole life insurance than all of their land and building combined. As a matter of fact, since 2014, conventional banks have quadrupled the amount of life insurance they purchase. Now, why, Brett, would they buy so much life insurance, these conventional banks? Is it because they're stupid or they know something the rest of us don't know?
Welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. What would it be like if you could implement something that you had learned 2 years ago or 5 years ago? The difference would be mind-blowing. And when we talk about infinite banking, it is just that. Today's guest used this strategy, created a strategy around the infinite banking system called the Money Multiplier. And he used this concept to pay off $984,711,000 of third-party debt in 39 months without having to work any harder, any more, make any more money. Just added a specific step in his process. And he's going to talk with us today. I'm going to dive in. You know, I love asking the questions, the drilling questions, because these are things that I've done before. I've used this process before, borrowing against whole life insurance to implement in investments, pay that money back, pay myself while I'm borrowing that money. I love this. I work with clients who leverage this concept strategy every single day. So let's get into this, get into these questions. How did this work? The nuts and bolts. Let's get us some resources. Everybody, please welcome Mr. Brent Kesler to the show. All right, here we go. Brent, my name is Brett. Your name is Brent. We were joking before we got started here, but welcome to the show, Brent. How does it feel to be Brent today?
Us fans feels fantastic, Brett. So I'm happy to be here, happy to share with your community. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. And we were joking just before, Brent and Brett, we've both been called each other's names our entire life. And I'm sure there's a lot of other names out there like that. But man, just want to jump right into this thing and talk. I'm excited to talk about what you have, this platform called the Money Multiplier, and how it can be applied for the listeners in two different ways. One, as the bills pile up for college, for continuing education, those types of debt that we build up, and then into real estate, how we can leverage this platform to just explode both avenues of our life. But before we get there, Brent, tell us a little bit about your background, where you started and where you're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll just take you back. Anyway, I was actually a chiropractor. I had 5 clinics in the Kansas City area. Anyway, I haven't practiced chiropractic at all since 2008, as far as in a clinic myself. I sold my last clinic in 2017. So in between all that time, I had associate docs that were in the clinic. And the concept that I teach now, the infinite banking concept or the money multiplier method, I've been teaching that around the country for about 12 and a half years since March of 2012. And my wife and I became empty nesters back in 2017. We moved from Kansas City down to Florida, which is
Congratulations.
Yeah, so we were talking about that, getting out of the cold weather, getting rid of the snow shovels and all of that. So I'm down here located in Port Orange, Florida right now, about an hour east of Orlando, right next to Daytona Beach. So, and just to kind of like take you from my chiropractic transition and kind of how I got into this concept of the money multiplier. I was at a chiropractic conference back in 2006, and I heard somebody on stage talk about this infinite banking concept, how to become your own banker. And I thought it was really good information, thought it was really cool, but it sounded too good to be true. And I'm sure you've heard things like that before, right? Where it looks good, but it sounds too good to be true. Well, I did nothing. I went home, went back to my normal chiropractic life, go back to another conference 2 years later in 2008. 10 or 12 of my colleagues that were at the previous conference are now at this conference with me. The only difference between me and them is they heard this information 2 years earlier. They acted up on it. So they were going, Yeah, applying that knowledge, right? I just had the knowledge, but if you don't apply the knowledge, you get nothing, right? So they were basically throwing up all over me how this concept was working in their life, and they were paying off debt. They were basically recycling, recapturing money, continuing to build wealth through their own debts and expenses that they already had. And they were so excited about this. I thought to myself, there has to be something to this, right? There's no way 10 or 12 of my colleagues are lying, maybe one or two, but not 10 or 12. So I came home to my wife, February 2008, and I said, honey, we have to start implementing this concept in our life. And it was at that time we found ourselves $984,711 in debt. That's what we owed to the third party creditors. Now, you're probably saying, well, Brent, how do you know that exact number? Well, that was part of the exercise. I had to know what that number was, right? So anyway, and you're thinking, how did you get into that debt? Well, I had my house that I lived in, my student loans from chiropractic school. At that time, I had two clinics, I had two chiropractic clinics. I had a house in the Lake of the Ozarks between St. Louis and Kansas City. And if you have a house on the lake, Brett, you have to have a boat and a wave runner, right?
Yeah.
You can't have a house on the lake without a boat.
You have to have other depreciating assets that tie into that. Yeah.
You do. And I'm an airplane pilot, so I had to have my own airplane. So it didn't take me a lot to become almost $1 million in debt. Well, I was able to apply this concept, this process, these principles that I learned through this concept. And I was able to pay that debt off in 39 months, 3 years and 3 months. And all I did is I added one step in my financial life. So in other words, I never had to change my cash flow. I didn't have to work any harder, take any additional risk with my money, or ever lose control of my money. I simply added one step. And I became so passionate and excited about it that I started teaching this concept then in March of 2012. And here I am now, fast forward 12 and a half years later, and travel around the country on live stages, virtual stages, Zoom, podcast, whatever it is. And my daughter, age 25, she also teaches this concept as well. As a matter of fact, my daughter has a podcast called The Money Multiplier. You guys should exchange podcasts sometimes, but be a guest on hers, be a guest on yours. But The Money Multiplier podcast, she's got over 130 episodes out there. I think now they just went live on iHeartRadio about 6 months ago.
Oh,
so
wow.
She records a new podcast every single week.
Wow. That's great. And you probably still at this time still have that boat, just absorbing the money. You still have that plane absorbing the money. I heard one time from somebody that has a big boat that says your home should never cost more than your boat, which I thought was interesting at the time. But it's one of those things where it's really, in the most part, like a car, is a depreciating. It's not even an asset; it's a depreciating liability, right? What this thing is. So it's just constantly losing value. This is very exciting for me because I've actually applied a couple of these things unknowingly. And then I heard it was called the infinite banking thing. And I watched some webinars and those kind of things like, oh, it's exactly. And I don't really have the nuts and bolts of it turned down. So I'd love to dive into this. But before we got there, you talked about having the knowledge and then sitting on that knowledge 2 years. And then you got these colleagues around you that had applied the knowledge. So for me, that knowledge plus action equals wisdom. Isn't that the cool thing? Knowledge plus action equals wisdom. So I love saying that, and I get it all the time too. This sounds too good to be true. And the old smell test, right? Does it smell like or not? Right, Brent? And before it made sense, but you did not apply that and you didn't have those 2 years. But when you come back and you see those actual real world applications happening, then as a salesman, sometimes it's hard to get past the salesman piece of the smell test. Just imagine what you would have felt like if you would have made this decision to take action 2 years ago. So I say the same thing now with what you have, that you're passing out the knowledge, right? Yeah. In order for the listeners to take action, how can we get past the smell test? Because it does sound too good to be true. Now, first of all, thank you for explaining $984,711 in debt, because my first question you hit right away was, what in the world were you doing to grab that? But you answered that. Now, how do we attack this to me, I have an idea of what this infinite banking is, and please help me get the nuts and bolts of it. Is it the difference between simple interest and compounding interest? Is that how this thing is laid together?
Well, yes, it is. I mean, again, the thing that you do is you pay simple interest, but you earn compounded interest, which is a big, huge equation. And then, too, Brett, I have a full 90 plus minute presentation that's recorded on my website, themoneymultiplier.com. I go into examples, I break this down and exactly how it works. There's handouts you can download and print out. But let me give you the high level view. The first thing, I got to make sure we give credit to the guy that wrote this book, Becoming Your Own Banker. Okay. A guy named R. Nelson Nash wrote this book. He was my mentor. He passed away 5.5 years ago in March of 2019 at age 87.
Oh, wow.
This book completely changed my financial life. This is a book that everybody should add to their wealth building library. And I know we were talking about audiobooks, and yes, you can get it on audio as well. For those of you that have ADD like me and don't like to read, but you like to listen to the audio. But this book completely changed my life. And it was in that book that I really, as far as took his teachings and his mentorship, and I have applied this concept. And now we just break it down into very simple, easy to use things. I actually wrote a book called Mapping Out the Millionaire Mystery. And I'm going to offer this book free to all your listeners as an ebook version. Just send me an email, Brent@themoneymultiplier.com. But I wrote the book with a colleague of mine, which is a client, now a colleague. His name is Chris Naugle. And a lot of you guys, especially if you're in the real estate world, you may have heard of Chris Naugle, Naugla. He lives in Buffalo, New York. He's very active in the real estate world. He's had a couple shows on TV, one on House Hunters, another one on HGTV called Risky Builders. I definitely suggest you follow chrisnaugle.com. But the concept itself is built. It's about, it's about you being able to take every dollar that you spend on every product or service that you buy and recapture and recycle that money. So you're turning every liability into an asset, every depreciating asset into an appreciating asset. And so the way that we're doing this, the way that we're doing it is exactly what the wealthy have been doing for over 200 years. Like if you go research the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Morgans, the Stanleys, the Barclays, if you go look and see how Walt Disney built Disneyland, how Ray Kroc funded McDonald's, how Pampered Chef got started before Warren Buffett bought Pampered Chef, this is the concept that they've applied in their life to build wealth. As a matter of fact, there's a guy out there named Robert Kiyosaki. He's famous for a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He also wrote a book called Second Chance. Well, in that book, Second Chance, he talks about exactly the concept that I teach. There's another guy named Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins wrote a book called Money, Master the Game. In chapter 5.4 of that Tony Robbins book, he talks about exactly what I teach. Now, the problem with those two books is the way they explain the concept is they make it too difficult to understand. And people read right through it and don't really understand how to apply what they just heard. So instead of applying the knowledge, as we're talking about, they're just saying, I'm not going to worry about that. I'll get to that later. I don't really understand what that means. Okay. Now, to get to the nuts and bolts, what is this whole thing, the infinite banking concept, the money multiplier, becoming your own banker? It is a process designed to build, keep, and create wealth through your own debts and expenses that you already have. For example, all of us have money, and the thing that we do with money is exchange it. And really, that's the definition of money. If you break it right down and I ask you, I say, what is the definition of money? The definition of money is one thing only. It is a means of exchange, right? We exchange money for food, food for money, car for money, money for car, house for money, money for house. So all we do is exchange money for products and services. For example, like if you go buy a car, and again, I explain this in great detail in my full 90-minute presentation. But the thing is, let's say you go buy a car, and the car that you buy, there's only one of three ways that you're going to buy that car. Right? Every one of you on this call listening right now, you've only bought a car one of three ways. You either paid cash for it, you bank financed it, or you leased it. Because I know you guys didn't steal the car, right? Because everybody's honest, right? You paid cash, bank finance it, or lease it. But in order to do that, Brett, what you had to do is take your money and give it to the car dealer. The car dealer gives you the car, and he's got the money. You get the car, he's got the money. Transaction is over. Everybody goes home happy. But how about if there's a way that you could add one step in your financial life and do exactly the same thing? Take your money, give it to the car dealer. He gives you the car, so he's got the money. But by adding this one additional step, you're now able to recycle and recapture and get all of that money back for the car. So not only do you have the car, you get the money as well. And if you do that with a car, guess what else you can do it with? Anything, any product or service, a boat, a bicycle, a vacation, your taxes, your charitable giving, a house, even equipment for a doctor's office. I was a chiropractor, right? I had these chiropractic clinics. I had to buy x-ray film. I had to buy headrest paper. I had to buy modality and therapy equipment. I had to pay my staff, my team. We call them CAs, chiropractic assistants. I'm able to recycle and recapture all that money, and that money stays in the family. There's no leakage of money. Now, the product that we use to do this with, the vehicle, the machine that we use, I'm about to tell you, and it's going to surprise a lot of people. And a lot of people are going to turn me off as soon as I tell you what it is that we're going to use to build, keep, and create wealth. And that machine that we're going to use is a whole life insurance policy in a mutual company that pays dividends. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. You're thinking, what? A whole life insurance policy to build wealth? That would never, ever work. And as a matter of fact, a lot of you are thinking, I know everything there is to know about life insurance, and you would never use that vehicle to build wealth because Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman told me it wouldn't work, right? No, no, no. You guys do not know everything there is to know, because if you knew, you would apply this principle in your life. Now, don't take my word for it. Okay, go and look and see who the number one purchasers are of whole life insurance in the world. They are conventional banks. Conventional banks own more in whole life insurance than all of their land and building combined. As a matter of fact, since 2014, conventional banks have quadrupled the amount of life insurance they purchase. Now, why, Brett, would they buy so much life insurance, these conventional banks? Is it because they're stupid, or they know something the rest of us don't know? They know something. So all we're going to do is mimic and imitate what the wealthy have been doing for over 200 years. Now, let me be totally clear. This is not any type of life insurance policy. No, no, no. It's not a term policy. It's not a variable. It's not a universal. It's not an indexed universal, an IUL policy. No, no, no. This is not the type of policy that you can go buy from your brother-in-law that sells life insurance, right? We all have a brother-in-law that sells life insurance. It's not that type of policy. It is a specifically designed, specially engineered whole life policy in a mutual company that pays dividends, that is designed for high immediate cash value. One more time, high immediate cash value. So in other words, Brett, when you put money into the life policy, and remember, you decide the amount you want to put into it. There's no right or wrong amount to put into it. I have over 14,000 clients in every state of the country. I've never told one client how much money to put in their policy. You decide how much you want to put into it and how often you want to put into it. And then when you put that money in, so remember the words I said, high immediate cash value, which means you have a high cash value to use immediately. And my definition of immediately is within 30 days. So now you're going to use that money in that policy to go pay your debts or your expenses, to go fund your investments, to buy your products or services. Whatever you're doing with that money, that is your money to use, and you can use that money as long as you want, because the insurance company, Brett, will never ask you, why do you want to take money from your policy in a policy loan? And they'll never ask you when and if you plan on paying it back, because they don't care. They don't care what you use the money for, and they don't care if you ever pay the policy loan back.
So much to unpack there. First of all, whole life mutual company that pays dividends, and it has a high and immediate cash value within 30 days, basically.
Yes.
So that's a big takeaway for me. A couple of questions that I do have is the banks buying life insurance. Does that mean that they're buying the policies just like like BlackRock would buy a note or something, or is it the actual banks are buying policies for their members, for their
no, great
board
question.
members?
Great question. They're actually buying policies on their key employees in the bank. Like, have you ever gone into a conventional bank and have you ever noticed, or if not, next time you go, notice this, how there's a lot of vice presidents in one branch of a bank. You got the
Everybody's a vice president.
Everybody's a vice president of the bank, the vice president of the tellers.
And I can't talk to nobody, and I got to talk to a computer.
I know, exactly, right?
Yeah.
But all these vice presidents in the bank are key employees. So what banks are doing is they're buying these policies on their key employees. So let me tell you a little story. Before I even knew this concept ever existed, all right, back when I was in St. Louis, Missouri, in chiropractic college, my wife had a job. It was a job at RGA. She was a program developer, like a system engineer. And it was at RGA, which stands for Reinsurance Group of America, which is a sister company of Metropolitan Life. Remember MetLife, UB, all that, right? Yep. So anyway, back when she got hired, part of her hiring package was they were taking out a life insurance policy on her body. Now, I didn't know why. My wife didn't know why until later, and we understood this concept. We didn't know why. But what they're doing, because of having an employee, they can buy a life insurance policy on her body and own and control it. After I found out about this later, I bought policies, and I still own these policies on my associate doctors I had on my chiropractic clinic, staff members that work in the chiropractic clinic, because I have a vested interest in them. As a matter of fact, until about 10 years ago, approximately, Walmart was buying life insurance policies on all of their employees without them even knowing about it.
Oh, wow.
Now, they still do it, but now the employee has to know about it. They have to disclose it. So that's what banks are doing. And they use it for tier one capital. But again, it's just not banks. It's other organizations. I mean, I have clients that have big businesses, 100 employees, 200 employees. And yes, they have these policies on themselves, but you got to remember, you get to a certain point in your own body where you get maxed out, where you can't have any more life insurance on your body, because the thing, you cannot insure a body the same way you can't overinsure a house or a car. So there are limits that you are allowed to have. So then what we do, or on top of that, Brett, we even have people that are not insurable, right? So maybe they have cancer. Maybe they, are diagnosed with something. Maybe they had 7 feet of their intestines removed and they can't qualify for a life insurance policy. They can still own and control the policy and practice everything in this concept. They're just not the insured. So they would own the policy maybe on a spouse, a child, a grandchild, somebody they have a vested interest in, such as a business partner or a business associate.
Interesting. And then this, the limitations on the value of a life, it's probably relevant to age and health and all of that stuff, I would imagine. I actually had a guest on who used to be an actuary. So that's like calculating the risk of these things.
Boy, I bet that was a boring podcast.
Yeah. Just the idea of it just, oh man, I can't. But then I get so fascinated, so frustrated all at the same time when we're talking about the other end of it, the dollars and cents of it. Yeah. But is there any like give or take, or do you know, like, what is the limitations on a life?
Yeah, no, great question.
Value of a life.
Yeah, exactly. Great question. And it can vary. And let me tell you how that's determined, right? Okay. So the thing that I always ask you is, I never ask you how much death benefit do you want, or how much life insurance value death benefit do you want. I ask you, how much cash do you want to put into the policy? And the amount of money that you put in the policy is going to determine how much death benefit that you have. And it's determined by age or health. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you have 2 twin brothers. So you guys are triplets. Well, no, that's not Right. Don't let me go there yet. Let's say there's three people, 20, 40, and 60. Okay. They're all in equal health. They're all in equal health, and they each want to put in, say, $10,000. I'm just going to use a random number. $10,000 into a life insurance policy. Well, so guess who's going to have the most death benefit? The youngest person. Who's going to have the least death benefit? The oldest person, right? But cash is going to be equal or very close to equal for all of them. So the death benefit is determined by age and health, right? Cash is not determined by that at all. So what I do is I solve your need for finance and cash, and that will buy you more death benefit than you can ever imagine, as long as I solve that problem. Now, let's say if you had a twin brother, for example, okay? And if obviously you're both the same age, but let's say you are a superstar Olympic athlete and your twin brother's an overweight tobacco smoker, and you're each going to put in $10,000 into the policy. Well, you're going to have more death benefit than your twin brother because he's more of a higher risk person to die early, right? Yeah. Now, the way we establish the policy in this banking concept is we purposely try to keep the death benefit as low as possible early on when we start the policy, because I want to make your cash high, right? We want to make the cash high. Like all the life insurance policies that most of your listeners have seen in the past, there's no cash value in a whole life policy in the first year, the second year, and not much more in the third or fourth year, right? Well, it's all because of the design and how they structure the policy. You have to structure it to where you design the policy to where we bump it up against this thing called a MEC line, MEC, Modified Endowment Contract. You never, ever want your policy to become a MEC. Now, anything that goes good for the people, for the world, for the citizens, normally the government will come in and say, oh, that's working too good for the people. Let's change the rules. So that's what the government did. All these people were putting all this money into life insurance policies, stuffing them. And the government said, hey, that ain't right. We're not getting our share from that. This isn't right. So what they did is back in June of 1988, they created this thing called a MEC, a Modified Endowment Contract. And what that says is if you try to overstuff or overfill that policy, you will MEC the policy and the policy becomes a MEC. And if the policy becomes a MEC, it's no longer treated as an insurance contract. It's treated as an investment and subject to taxation. So we get the MEC limit. So now what do? Whenever you design a policy, okay, let's say, Brett, you come to me and say, Brett, I want to do this. I want to put in $1,000 a month into the policy. And all of a sudden you're putting in $1,000 a month and you're like, man, this is working just like Brent said it would. It's even working better. I want to up my premium. I want to put in $2,000 a month. Well, you can do that, but you can't do it in that policy. You have to go get another policy because that policy will only hold so much. Just like this 12-ounce glass of water, I can only get 12 ounces of water in this. I can't get 14 ounces, right? I'll overfill it. Well, you can't overfill the policy or it'll MEC. So the way we get around that is we go buy additional policies. So when you want to do more premium, which you will want to do more premium. 91% of my 14,000 plus clients have more than one policy that have been with me a year or longer. So when that happens, we just start additional policies. I mean, I myself have 29 of these policies, and I buy at least one every 1 to 2 years. So
then the yes. Limitations on the contributions, then I hear you say $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month. So it's not a situation where instead of me using my own capital, say 100,000 to do a BRRRR strategy on a rental, I've got to build a plan that pushes up against this MEC line to build that $100,000 value. How fast could I do that?
Well, it's not you that has to build it. All you have to do, the only job you have is to tell us how much you want to put in there. Mm-hmm. And then however much you want to put in there, we're going to ask you some questions. For example, let's say you say $1,000 a month, and I'm going to say, okay, are you going to continue to be able to do at least 400 a month? Okay, Brett. And if you say, well, I don't know, Brent, I might have some months where I can't do 400, then I'm not going to let you start at 1,000 because the thing you can do is reduce or lower the premium, but you can't take it all the way down to zero in the first year. As time goes on, you can continue to reduce it and eventually pay nothing. But the amount that you put in will buy you that X amount of death benefit. Now, let's say you're trying to put, and I've got clients that do this. They're like, Brent, I want to put in $1 million a year into the policy, for example. Well, that's not going to work because that $1 million of premium will buy multi-millions of death benefit. And based on the client's information, based on their gross income and their net worth and their assets, it doesn't justify or make sense for them to be able to put that much money in there, right? So like, let's say you say, I want to put in $1 million a year, but your income is only $900,000 a year. Well, that doesn't make sense. The insurance company will not allow you to do that. So anytime you go to get one of these policies, they're going to ask you questions, gross income, net worth, health, things like that, right? So that is a number that the insurance company determines on what your human life value is. So for example, I have Mark Zuckerberg and I have the homeless guy living underneath the bridge. Okay. Who's got the higher value, life value, according to the insurance company? Actually, it would be Mark Zuckerberg, right? Because the homeless guy underneath the bridge is not going to be able to pay the premiums that Mark Zuckerberg can pay, at least right now. Mm-hmm. So that's how the insurance company determines it. So your only job is to say, how much money do you want to put in? And our job is to go out and get you that number that you're requesting or get as close as we can. And if we can't get it, we come back and tell you the reasons why we can't just get that number.
Very interesting. And then definitely the time feels like the limit. So the sooner you start, the better. It almost feels like. If somebody wanted to get $100,000 in, and I mean, is that even because could you build the policy to do it in 1 year? Or you have to build it to do it for multiple years. Is there a minimum time that the contributions have to be made?
Yeah. So, okay, a couple things on your questions. Number one, the quicker you start, the better, because the policy gets more efficient over time. Remember that growth continues to grow. Like my oldest policy, I started in February of 2008, so I paid 17 years of premium into that. Every dollar I put into that, it gives me now about $2.70, right?
Oh, wow.
Next year, it'll even give me more. Next year, more, right? Every year is more efficient. That's not me telling you. It's in the contract. Today's better than yesterday. Tomorrow's better than today. When you put the money into the policy, you're able to have that cash value to use immediately within 30 days, right? You can use that. So you don't have to build it. You can dump a lump sum of money in immediately as long as we stay underneath the MEC limit. So it has to make sense. For example, $1,000 a month is $12,000 a year. You can normally dump in 10 times your annual premium. So basically, just to give you a high level example, let's say you told me you wanted to put $12,000 into your policy in the first year. You could dump 10 times that amount into it. So about 120,000 as a one-time dump. Okay. Now, normally what happens, Brett, because the value continuously goes up, you never stop paying premium on the policy. Even if you could, you don't, because of the growth factor. Like just for example, that policy I just described, my oldest one. If I put in $1 and I get $2.70, do I ever want to stop that? I mean, that would be crazy. How hard is it for me to find $1 if I know I'm going to be able to get $2.70 from that dollar immediately, right? Yeah. I would never stop doing that.
So only when you die. Only when you die.
Well, yeah, but at the time of my death, I can't put any more premium in anyway because I'm the insured individual. The policy is over. So now we have the death benefit number that pays out to the beneficiaries.
And now, that's the game that the insurance is playing then, because you've got the cash value. And it's only the cash value. It's none of the growth. So if you had to take that out, say things weren't working, you had to pull the money, it's only the cash value. The growth of that money only is payout upon death.
Not exactly. It's the cash value and the growth inside of the money. The death benefit will always be higher than the cash value or the loan availability. I'll give you an example. Let's say let's say your policy today has a $1 million death benefit and it has a $600,000 cash value. Okay. Death benefit's always higher. Now, so let's say you've taken out all $600,000 of that money, and all of a sudden today you die, pass, or graduate. I like to use the word graduate. Use whatever word you want.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you die.
I graduate.
Okay, all of a sudden you pass, right? Now, the policy is over because you pass. So the $1 million now, death benefit, it's going to pay off the $600,000 loan because they've already given you that money while you're living. And now all the assets of that $600,000 bought, or that however you spent that $600,000 and hopefully you bought assets with it, will now go to your beneficiaries or whoever you designated that to go to. And the additional $400,000 in the remainder of the million will go to your beneficiaries tax free. So essentially what we're doing is we are able to live off of a portion of our death benefit while we're living. Instead of most insurance policies, you get no benefit. It's after you die, then your beneficiaries get the death benefit. No, in this case, you get the money ahead of time, the cash value, the growth of the cash value ahead of time. And then now it's actually you using the money instead of you leaving it to your ungrateful children.
Ungrateful children.
Yeah. Do you guys have any of those? Am I the only one that has ungrateful children?
I have a journey, and this could be a whole nother show here, the way the pendulum swings, whether we grow up with money, we grow up without money. When we make that journey and graduate to become a parent ourselves, how the pendulum swings for what we did have or what we didn't have. And in my life, it's me graduating, but also understanding that perspective and then applying in my children's life to be the best father I can is to make sure that they are humble, honest, full of integrity, and just pure, genuine, God-loving people. That to me is who I feel I'm set out to raise. Now, are they? That's the question.
100% true. And this is why we have to get around the kitchen table with our families and teach them all of the things that you just mentioned, and also teach them about money and finances and how money actually works and how you keep that wealth inside of your family where there's no money being leaked out to other people, and you are growing that wealth inside of your family without any of it being leaked out. Now, that doesn't mean we don't serve other people. I mean, I've donated more money in the last 5 years than I've donated in the first 52 years of my life combined, right? Yeah. I mean, because the thing is when you keep more, when you're in control of more, you're able to give more. And that's
intentionally.
Yes. And be proud about it and be able to help and serve. And then when you start helping more and more people, it just comes back to you. So my favorite quote in the world is by the late Zig Ziglar. And Zig Ziglar said this: help enough other people get what they want and you end up getting what you want. And that's my mission in life, is to serve as many of God's children as possible with this knowledge that this man right here, R. Nelson Nash, gave to me. It's just my mission to carry that on and serve. And now we have people on our team. We call them mentors, money mentors. My daughter as being one of them. Chris Noggle as being another one. You know, we have several mentors on our team that travel around the country, do Zooms, podcasts, webinars like this. And we're teaching the concept. We're giving them the tools of the wealthy. We're giving them how money actually worth, or as far as how money works, and it's up to them to take it and apply it. And to go back on what you said earlier, the earlier you start, the better. Because see, here's what I did. Back in 2006, when I heard this, didn't believe it, I didn't start. Well, I really hurt my family by waiting 2 years. And Brett, here's why. Because let's hypothetically say back in 2006, I had 50 years of life left. Well, now that I waited 2 years, I don't have 50 years of life left. I've only got 48 years. Well, I always have to start. So I didn't miss out on year 1 and 2. I missed out on year 49 and 50, the most efficient
Oh,
years
yeah.
of the growth.
Perspective. Yep.
So that's the way. So I cheated my family, and my wife and my kids remind me of this all the time. Dad, you cheated us out of money. I cheated them out of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars by waiting 2 years.
Yep. No, I love it. I love that. Switching that perspective. And the idea of Stop Selling and Start Helping by the Carolina boy himself, Zig Ziglar, down there in school. I always love listening to him. We were talking about audiobooks earlier. He definitely has that South Carolina swang to his talk. Man, I could go on and on for hours and diving into all of this. I know this makes sense. I've implemented it on a small scale, and that's why I ask these direct questions from the questions that are popping up in my mind, because I see this as not only a generational wealth capacity, right? A vehicle, but inside of what we're doing in the real estate world is 100% another vehicle. Because if I'm paying money to a bank, I can still pay money in this way and pay that interest in a tax-free, because as that death benefit pays, it's total taxation difference in the way that that money is earned and taxed. So very interesting. That's why you bumped up against that MEC line, because the government is going to allow us to do things that they see grows the community and grows the the health of the people around us. And when it gets too good, then it's changed. So much here. Where can we find you? Where's the best way to find you, and how can you connect us with, whether it's the providers, the systems, the processes? Where do we got to go, Brent?
Yeah, well, yeah, great. So like our company is called the Money Multiplier. Our website is www.themoneymultiplier.com. In order to watch my full 90+ minute presentation with all the examples and the handouts, just go to the website, click under resources, and click on Watch Brent Now. If you want a copy of my ebook, I'll email you the ebook, Mapping Out the Millionaire Mystery. Just send me an email, Brent, B-R-E-N-T, Brent at themoneymultiplier.com. I'll send you a copy of the ebook. And if this is something after you watch that full 90+ minute presentation, or maybe you've already watched it or you know about this and you're thinking about implementing this concept in our life, okay, as far as implementing this concept in just like your own life, hopefully, and since you learned it from me, you'll do it with us at the Money Multiplier. Not that you have to do it with us, but hopefully you will. The thing you can do is go and you can schedule a strategy call with one of our money mentors, and they will walk you through the process, how it will work for you specifically in your own financial situation. There's never any selling. We're never going to ask you to buy anything at all. All we're going to do is give you the information. As a matter of fact, if this is something that you decide to do, you're never going to pay me a dime or my company, the Money Multiplier, a dime for anything. See, I get paid one way only. I get paid the same way your car insurance guy or gal gets paid. If you go to John Smith, the Allstate man, to buy car insurance, the check that you write is not to John Smith. You write it to Allstate. Allstate pays John Smith a commission. So I am a life insurance agent in every state of the country. And if you're in Canada, I have a resource and a contact in Canada as well. So I have over 14,000 clients in every state of the country. So I would be your servicing agent. I would be the life agent. So you're going to get the policy through us as a servicing agent. But then I work with insurance companies, mutually owned companies that have been paying dividends for well over 127 consecutive years plus. So our team will go through all of that with you. So hopefully if you like the information, you'll do it with us, but it's not necessary. You can do it with other people as well.
That's amazing. And thank you again for your time today, Brent. Like I said before, it definitely makes sense. And for us to take this knowledge and then implement it into action to create this wisdom. And this wisdom is what travels through generations. And that wisdom, I hope, in the wealth generation piece, it pairs along with the emotional intelligence, the spiritual intelligence that really amplifies the ins and outs of what money can do for us. The money amplifies the good and money amplifies the bad. So if we pair this with those things we've talked about, sitting at the dinner table, having dinner conversations with our family, pulling God back into family is really big as well too in this. But ultimately, we then can be intentional in what we're doing. And this is giving back. This is helping and not selling. It's beautiful. It works. Infinite banking and the money multiplier. Thank you so much for your time, Brent.
Thank you, Brett. Thanks for having me on, and I'm excited to be able to share with your community in the future. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. And to the listeners out there today, thank you for your time and your attention. You better put your attention on your money. Once you have your money situated, man, it's just beautiful. Then you can intentionally give back. So this infinite banking approach is very interesting. And we've applied it personally with the whole life insurance, in real estate. And just as Brent was saying, paying down debts, really to get the nuts and bolts, go visit Brent and take action. That's all there is to it. This is the Real Estate Mogul MD.